GLOBIS.
Hi, good morning, and welcome to the Space Business Panel. And thank you, Alex, for coordinating this panel. Yeah, he did a wonderful job to prepare for this session. And it is my great honor to welcome the distinguished guest as a panelist. And I'm working currently as a member of the Space Policy Committee under Cabinet Office in Japan. And my goal is to, bring the space activities to the next generation, next level, next era, to involve more and more people and more industries. So I'd like to hear each of your background and current activities and your vision in space firstly. So let's start with Hidetaka-san.
Yes. Thank you for inviting me to the panel. My name is Aoki. I'm a space business evangelist. I'm sure you met the first space business evangelist in the life because I'm the only one in the world. And my job is to promote commercial space activities to get everybody involved in these activities. And main job is to, I'm an investor. So I'm a venture capitalist, and I'm the only venture capitalist whose background is aerospace engineer and a rocket scientist. I used to work on the International Space Station project as an engineer. So my job is to support space startups to succeed and make new industries as a commercial space industry. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Chris Blackerby. I'm the COO of Astroscale. I wish I had a cool title like Space Evangelist or even Astronaut would be better, but I'll settle for COO of Astroscale. I had 15 years of experience with NASA, working in international relations and policy development. 10 of those years were in DC, and then the last 5 I've been with the U.S. Embassy here as the NASA attaché in Asia. I finished that job in July of this year, and rather than return to DC, I like Tokyo so much that I decided to retire from NASA and take this job with Astroscale. Now, Astroscale is a company that is looking to clean up space debris. The orbital environment is congested, and it's getting more crowded all the time, and it will get much more crowded in the next 5 to 10 years. So our company is trying to figure out solutions to mitigate that problem. We rely on the orbital environment for everything these days: directions, money, weather, banking, so much. And so we want to make sure it's sustainable for future generations. A lot of issues with that, business case issues, technology issues, regulatory issues, so a lot of interesting challenges to solve. So I'll be happy to talk about both the space policy and international relations from my NASA time, but also how the government and private sector, especially space startups, can work together in future space exploration. Thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is Bonaud. I'm here. You may wonder why helicopters are related to space. So, the first name of my function with SAFRAN. I'm representing the SAFRAN group, and we have a large helicopter engines position in Japan. So I'm also here to represent the French industry, aerospace industry, from helicopter for sure, but for space activities also. And through that GFAS representation, we have also a strong footprint in the European Space Agency and space-related activities. So I will be pleased to extend my comments on not only the French point of view, but the European point of view. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Dan Tani. Let's see. Currently, I teach at the American School in Japan, but previously I was trained as a mechanical engineer, worked for several aerospace companies in America, and then got fortunate enough to get selected by NASA to serve as an astronaut there. During my time there, I flew on 2 missions, none of them with Naoko, unfortunately, but we did spend some time in Russia together training. After my time at NASA, I actually returned to industry and did that for a while, the space and aerospace industry. And then we made a family decision to take a left turn career-wise, and we wanted to expose our children to a different culture and learn that the world is much more interesting than the suburbs of Washington, D.C. And so in connection with the American School, who took a huge leap of faith in bringing me out there, I joined the faculty, and now I teach high school science and computer programming and middle school design, and I'm having a wonderful time meeting and working with the leaders of tomorrow, which I'm convinced that these children will be. And so I can bring to this panel some human spaceflight experience, some industry experience. I'm excited from Chris's new endeavor with going into what this burgeoning field of very small startup companies getting into into an industry which has historically been only huge companies could afford to get into space, and now brilliant ideas and innovative design is making its way down to allowing small companies to do that. And then I'm also happy to talk about how we inspire the next generation to oddly inspire them to go into space, which you would think would be not hard to do, but there is some work to be done to convince them that there's a real future in space for them.
Well, thank you, everybody. And so, as you see, we have variety guests, and they can bring a perspective of Japan, of course, in the U.S. and the European perspective, and also an Asian perspective based on their experiences. So, I'd like to hear more deeply about the current situation of your activities and your challenges you're facing, and also if you have any suggestions or proposal to move on to the next step, that will be also welcome. So would you like to start maybe in this order? Okay.
So
you can jump in here anytime. Yeah.
Yes. I'm an investor, so I meet a lot of startups all over the world. And not only space, I make investment into space, robotics, 3D printer, future generation automobile, and a lot of startups. And what I see from the space startups is that there's not many successful space startups yet, besides SpaceX. Who else? You can't even name it. So we need to have more successful startups in the space sectors. To do that, we, as an investor, we need to support. And also, by looking at Japanese industry, we have a lot of large corporations with a lot of internal reserves. If you add up all the cash that large corporations have, maybe it adds up to more than, I don't know, $4 trillion in total, which is quite a lot. And most of the people are looking for frontier technologies, including AI, IoT, robotics, and here comes space. And we want people to make investment into space startups like Astroscale. And that's one of the things that I usually do. So I meet a lot of startups as well as large corporations to get involved in the space startups. So if any of you are interested in space startups, that's what I do. And please talk to me. And that's my main message for today.
So I was at a couple years ago, the Google Lunar X Prize. You may have heard of that, the first private company to launch to the moon and travel on the moon for several hundred meters, transmitting high definition data back to Earth, wins, I think, $20 million. So there's 5 companies now competing for that, and it's been extended now to March, I think, of next year, the deadline. So 5 companies trying to do that. I was at a conference for the Google Lunar X Prize a couple of years ago when I was still with NASA. And I was the only government person in the room. Everyone else were the startup guys, and they were excited, and they were so pumped about making changes in space. And they got up there and gave presentations and talked about their plans for utilization of lunar resources and how they're going to contribute to the next steps, and how guys like NASA old school. They can't do it anymore. There's no way. And I was sitting there just listening in the back. And there was just talk among everyone during the presentations and during the coffee hours of how this is the future. But when you looked at all of those companies that were talking, none of them had launched anything except PowerPoint presentations. And so there was that talk among the startup sector that the government is old, we have to stop relying on them for anything to do with the future. And then when I talk to my NASA colleagues, they say, oh, these startups, you know, a dime a dozen. There's so many out there, so few are going to be successful. We need to refocus, you know, that attention on government and what government can do. And so obviously, the answer is in the middle, right? Obviously, there has to be a cooperation, a recognition that with all of this startup, with all of the things that we're talking about in terms of investing in new companies, there will always be a place for government activity in space. There are so many aspects of space that are inherently not profitable activities. You know, most of the things NASA does is not going to be, you know, for profit. So there's going to be a place for government, but then it's such an exciting time in the kind of small space ecosystem. There's so much attention on it, and there's so many problems to be solved that more flexible, newer companies are able to address. And so that intersection between what the government can do and what the private sector can do, it's going to be very interesting to see how that pans out. And we're just at the cusp of understanding how that will work. And NASA, you know, we contract with SpaceX as the one most successful startup in space that they are, but there really aren't that many others out there. And in the US, those small companies are driven by, I'll use the word eccentric, but excitable, passionate billionaires. That's what's driving the larger space startup industry in America. But that's not really the case here. You look at the smaller companies, Astroscale included, we're driven by more investors that are looking for that next big answer. So within that space startup ecosystem, how to manage those expectations of those billionaire, passionate billionaires with companies that are looking for a return is the other aspect that I think we need to focus on and think about. So in that big picture, there's a lot to think about, but that whole idea of combining the government activity with the new startup space activity and how that's going to work together will be one of the biggest questions that we're going to see answered in the next 5 to 10 years of space business, I think.
Okay, so Chris, I have some questions. So the process, the U.S. made a new ecosystem between the government and the small private sections. Was country smooth, or you have lots of discussions or arguments to reach that new system?
Yeah, well, I'd almost not use the past tense in that. I'd say it still is. It's not smooth. It's still bumpy in some ways. But there's always a couple different sides. Even I can talk more freely about U.S. politics now that I'm not in the government anymore. I won't go too deep into it, but I will say that when the NASA administrator was being selected or decided on who the next NASA administrator was, the industry kind of rumors was always, well, is he going to be an old space guy or a new space guy? He's going to be someone that wants to invest a lot of money into building the next generation heavy lift launch vehicle in the US, or is he going to be someone that focuses on funding new space and making those partnerships with the new companies? And so that kind of conflict or that disagreement still exists. But we're moving toward, I think, a better cooperative environment between the two, as evidenced by NASA's heavy investment in companies like SpaceX. We're very reliant on SpaceX and Orbital Technologies and Boeing as the big companies, but also the small companies. There's investment, and we're doing that also at Astroscale, talking with JAXA and ESA about cooperation. So, it's a new paradigm. So anytime there's a new paradigm, it takes people some time to get used to it. So people are in the process of getting used to it, but I anticipate that it will continue to evolve into a successful partnership.
Okay, thank you. Because Japan is also at the starting point for the moving to the new ecosystem. And recently, the small company, the venture, Axel Space got a contract from JAXA to develop a new satellite. And the hackathon team, the Google X Prize participants, has also got a contract to the joint research with JAXA. So it's getting, improving in Japan as well. So Giz, would you tell me?
I come back on my title, linking the helicopters to the space. It is true that in the past, the evolution was driven by engineers. So like you said, are you able to make that super big rocket that will bring 10 of people in space? Today, the shift is completely different. This is people like Aoki that will drive the business. And the mission in the future will be the trigger of all the technology behind. We know, like in the past, in the aerospace industry, there is a lot of bricks of technology shared between a lot of small companies that time after time went together and bring those big players like Boeing, like Airbus, like us, SAFRAN, and so on. And that has been made over time. That has not been made just like that. And if we have the right mission, those technologies will go together without even thinking of it. And that will take time. That will take a change, a shift in mindset, and that today is maybe not there yet because of the technology is more important than the mission. But as we see the future, the mission will drive the technology. And that's very true. There may be some few missions that will be driven by the technology because technology will allow to do something, but most of it will be what is the idea. The IT revolution was the same. We can do things with computer. Why don't we use them? Why we don't develop things? And the same for the airplanes, the same for the helicopters, the same for the engines, the rockets. So I truly believe that there is a big shift in the way of people are thinking, and where the government shall support more and more the smaller industry that will bring the technology that will be necessary for the future. If the government step back and saying that, okay, this is just sovereignty issues, I need my satellite to watch the neighbor, that will never work. There is much larger challenge than just protecting the borders today. And the fear is that some country will just narrow their investment on the military or the defense sector. And we do believe that the military or defense sector will be just a byproduct of the evolution. That being said, I'm referring to Danny's comment on the number of people that want to go in the space. Today, there is a lot of work that we shall do, all of us, is to bring more students, more schools, more attraction to the space. And space is not only just, sorry for that, just being inside the rocket and going to space. There is tons of activities around, and that must be enhanced by the government. And I believe the government shall be also the driver for education, which is very, very important. That's all for now.
Thank you. So for the European countries, you have a good alliance, under the ESA and also between the companies as well. So could you explain how is the ecosystem in Europe a little bit more?
Yes, I would say that the experience of ESA is really a key driver for Europe being at the position that we are today. That has been quite a long and painful road. There is a lot of strong countries in Europe, if you take Germany, France, UK, just to say three of them, with different point of view, different interest, different technology that they want to put on top of it. So it has been a long path, but today I believe that ESA is the kind of federal agency that NASA is and JAXA is in Japan. So that has been a long way, and today we are much more open for participation in different programs, not only the European one, but also the American one and the Japanese one. There is already some things going on between Japan and ESA, same with the space station, same with even the Russian, maybe tomorrow the Chinese. Anyway, this ESA things now is really trans-border organization. There is no country that is above the other one. We still have some difficulties in the when it comes to realizing things. You know, there is some competition between, for example, satellite side between Airbus and Thales or Alenia Space. I mean, so there is, and that's natural, and that will drive the price a little bit lower, so giving access to more people, hopefully. But at the same time, it's still a small break in that endeavor for being the largest space agency in the world. And I believe that aiming for being the largest space agency is the wrong statement.
Okay, thank you. And Dan?
Sure. Brings up these comments bring up many thoughts. One is I should maybe back up a little bit for those who may not be familiar with the current state of the space industry. Historically, and maybe what you think is when you build a satellite, it's the size of a school bus, and it costs $1 billion, and you need to put it on a huge rocket, and it does something like give you cable TV or images or something that has a big mission. And that's why it was huge companies that had to do that, and not only to build it and to support it, but take the risk of putting their $1 billion satellite on a rocket and hope for the best. What's happened in the past 5 years, 10 years or so is that the incredible development of micro-technologies, that now a satellite can literally fit in your briefcase or in your backpack. I've been to companies where I'm talking to them about the exciting things that they're going to do in space, and I go, where are you going to build? What's your manufacturing facility? And they point over there. They have a clean room set up right next to the conference room, and they're building space hardware right next to their conference room. And so now, and these satellites can be built for thousands of dollars, a handful of thousands of dollars. The trick, of course, is getting them a ride into space, but once they're there, they can do some pretty amazing things. So that's the beauty of this now, the new industry, is that with a very small investment, companies can get into space and do and because of that, people's ideas can generate whole businesses. So that's sort of this explosion of small space, and that's why the funding, and it's as much a business endeavor now as it is a technological endeavor. So that's very, very exciting. I'll also touch on what Guy mentioned about students, and I think the space industry still is oddly or ironically suffering from its own success, its own prestige. And the example I'll give is I came to the American school last year, and I taught a bunch of very promising high school students, seniors and juniors, and they're American, generally citizenship, and they're targeting the American university market. And it was quite clear to me that my celebrity to them was not being an astronaut, but it was being a graduate of MIT. That was the wow factor for these students. It was not that I went to space, but that somehow I got into MIT, and so many students, a surprising number of students, came to me and said, "I wish I could apply to MIT." Boy, and I thought, really, you wish you could apply to MIT? Why? What's the mystique? Why is the mystique so high that you can't even conceive of applying to MIT? So I spent a lot of time talking to them about how great a place it is and how much fun it is, and everybody should apply if you even have the thought. Send it in, and several kids actually at the end of the school year who did not get in but who applied said, "Thank you so much for even giving me I was honored to get the rejection letter." And I believe the space industry has that same sort of it's over there kind of image. And we say rocket science. We say it's my gosh, it's rocket science. And I believe that, and I wouldn't have, until I saw it firsthand, I wouldn't have believed it, but I think there are kids that think it's unachievable. I can't work in the space industry. Maybe I'll be a lawyer or an engineer, making something else, but my goodness, space, that's for the chosen few. Well, I feel like now it's part of my mission to demystify space. It's just engineering and it's just physics, and it's really cool. But we're going to need many, many, many more people to get involved, not in just making things go very fast, like rocketry, but making things do interesting things in space and doing calculations and figuring out where it is and where to point and what to do. So I feel like now it's sort of part of my mission to make it a welcoming industry and an accessible industry or accessible career path for kids, because we're going to need the best and brightest, and not just the ones that know they want to work in space when they're 10 years old, but open their eyes and think about it. The other thing I wrote down is I see in Japan now the space industry that's taking off here being much more international, recruiting. Well, first of all, the ones I've met are, even the Japanese companies are English speaking. They're trying to recruit engineers from all over the world, more so than the American companies that I'm familiar with. Of course, they're happy to get the talent that's out there, but I don't see them recruiting around the world as much as the Japanese companies that I'm familiar with. And I think, of course, that's more valuable. That diversity of education background and perspective can only make a company, any organization, stronger. So I think that's a real benefit to the Japanese companies that I'm becoming familiar with.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I think the same way, because in JAXA, or I think it's the same as NASA, the employers, are not only engineers or researchers, but 30%, 40% are lawyers, economists, and psychologists, and everybody should be involved. And right now, I feel we have lots of specialists in each area, but we are lacking human resources to integrate them and to propose a new right missions, as Guy mentioned, the right missions, and to manage it. So I think those kind of integrator or proposers are more needed, I think. So, but space, it still seems to be a faraway place for, in ordinary life. That's also true. And if, we'd like to do something about space, but it's still lots of, hurdles or some walls. So how would you break that hurdles? Do you have any proposals?
Yes, one of the proposals that I would like to make is the role of the government as customers for the space startups. So if you look at the US, NASA or the government agencies are usually tend to become the first customers of the space startups. And in Japan, which is not the case. And if the government becomes the first customer of the space startups, it's much easier for the space startups to acquire second or the third customers from the private industry, and which makes investors like us to take risks much easier. So that's one of the things that I would like to propose. And we're not sure how to generate money in space yet. We do have some, but we don't have it enough yet. So we would like to work with the government and generate some good examples and show the in the private industries that they can also get involved in the space activities.
Yeah, so first I completely agree on the government as an anchor kind of investor is necessary, because there isn't a clear, immediate ROI for a lot of these space startups. It's tough. And so finding investors that are looking for traditional returns on a near-term basis, it's kind of hard. So having the government is really important. And then to get people excited and involved, it's cyclical, right? It starts with some of these inspirational figures who then inspire that next group, who then inspire the next, and the circle grows, right? And so in the US, there's a clear line pointing to what Elon Musk has done. And he has started this revolution in small space ideas. So many people want to be the next Elon Musk. Wherever he speaks at space conferences, there's lines out the door. They want to be that person. And so you see that happening here. And now the next generation is looking at that and trying to do the same thing. And so that inspiration is happening and is being cyclical and opening it up and at events like this and any other conferences talking about, hey, there's people doing this. There's people who are out there, raising money and trying to solve big problems in space. And then that inspires that next generation. And Dan, you talked about seeing people building hardware in a conference room. Yeah, we're doing that. We literally have a clean room on the first floor of a building in Kinshicho where we are building space hardware. And so it's an exciting place. Like where I am, there's 30 people or so in the company, mostly engineers, and we're building satellites, which we hope will lead toward missions that reduce the amount of space debris. We find a problem that needs to be solved, put smart, energetic, excited people on that problem, get some government support, and we're going to start seeing it grow. We're going to start seeing investment grow, and we're going to start seeing a younger generation of people excited to be involved in solving these next problems.
Yeah. In addition, I believe the participation of government is key. Those governments, they will be the regulatory body of everything. And if you can drive them to be part of the adventure, they may be more aware of what is needed really, rather than just protecting, like I said before, the borders or whatever it is. Today we don't know how the regulation will be for the future. There will be more and more launches, tens of thousands maybe in the next 20 years. That will be a lot of launches, a lot of debris to collect, and also a lot of regulation to be put in place in order to harmonize and be sure that there will be no interaction or trouble between those satellites, whatever their goal is. So definitely, yes, the challenge is to bring the government office inside the game.
Not to be a defender of the government's, but of the government's role in aerospace, but I'll remind one other function that the governments have in the aerospace industry, and that's public safety. And so, but it's a double-edged sword. If you launch a rocket in America, for instance, there's an entire infrastructure of what's called range safety, which means that when you fire the rocket, it will go, an independent agency will verify it's going where it's supposed to go, and if it veers someplace that would endanger public safety, they have the job of destroying it, whether there's human beings on it or not. And I think that's a valuable role, and that is a essentially government role, that should be a public safety role. But then I heard, I'm struggling with the company name, that's an American company that's launching out of New Zealand now. Rocket Labs, yes. And so they're an American company, and they're launching off the North Island of New Zealand out towards the ocean. And I have a basic familiarity with it, but since it is an American company, even though they're launching out of New Zealand, they fall under the U.S. Federal Aviation Administration, and so they required range safety, which at the first blush, there's nothing to run into where they're launching from. And so now the complexity of the rocket had to be much greater, because now it has to have a transmitter receiver, and it had to have a self-destruct function, all these things. And so I think there must be a way out of that, where the government's role is a necessity, but it can't be a burden to the innovations of modern day rocketry, modern day self-awareness of the machines that might be able to, and I know SpaceX is trying to do this, put that function into the rocket rather than onto the ground. But But I do think government has a public safety role in such a dangerous industry, but we can't let it be a burden on innovation.
Yeah, true. Thank you. In JAXA, we have a new business promotion office right now, and they are working with many people who are interested in space business, and also they are working for the technology transfer, which aren't based on a tax, but now, which will be utilized for the space industries as well. So I think those kind of, communications is important as well. And I think that each role of the government and the private sectors are important as well. And I'd like to get some question from the audience to deepen the discussions. And if you have any comments or questions. Okay, so please.
Okay, so thank you very much. This is Muto from IBM. One question is about the Yamazaki-san pointed out that we need to have the integration of the specialization. There are lots of specialists, but someone needs to integrate. And then the discussion went into the government, the role of the government, but from the individual point of view, how can we grow the capability of the integrating all the specialists, and how can we grow our capability? That's the question.
Oh, thank you so much. I think, we need to cooperate more between each areas, and engineers and business person should cooperate and communicate more. So Hori-san and I are discussing to making some space school under the G1 GLOBIS for the business school, so that the more financial managers can learn the space as well, and we can communicate in the future better. So that's my hope. But right now each specialist are we have so many specialists. So just connecting dots are very important, as a panelist mentions. So I need your help as well.
That was a great setup question for you, Yamazaki-san, to promote the G1. Yeah.
Could you help some more?
Yeah, yes, we'd love to. I'd be happy to participate. But that's basically what we're trying to do, not thinking about the integration generally, but at Astroscale we're looking for engineers, and we're looking for the lawyers and the PR people and everybody to come together, and not all types of engineers. So there's the specialists at one level, and then above that there has to be the integrators, and that integrator is the C-level people of the companies that are going to try to integrate across the industries and specialties. And then those people who are inspired by that, then they go to these kind of programs and learn more about the financial aspects, the policy aspects of running this kind of business, and then they're going to be the next one. So it's a combination of education and then more of these small companies making sure they have a diverse team to solve these problems.
Yeah, the past has shown us the importance of the integration. If we look at the aerospace industry, there is just a few makers. I was mentioning Boeing, Airbus, and we can add Bombardier and so on. And this really is the key. And those guys, they are integrators. They are the key of the product, because they integrate all the technology. I was mentioning before all the bricks, the technology bricks that we can get from either internally, the large company, but also from the outsiders. And the key point is to integrate all those technology bricks into something that is very relevant for the mission. And once again, I truly believe that definition of the mission is key. And then the integration of all what is existing all over the world to make that mission successful is key, once again. So that there is a very big challenge, and question is very important. Yes, the integration is something that today has been more under the government control, because they had the capacity to ask for larger operation kind of things. And now this is shifting to the private sector. So this is where also the government shall help the private sector to be able to assemble and make that possible. So once again, I'm maybe too much demanding on the government side, but this is the key to switch from a almost 100% controlled technology by the government to a private sector controlled technology, and that cannot be done just because we decided. And it's like the control on the rain policy. That's why I want the government being inside the project, because they will be able to measure the effect of their policy directly, and that is very important for the future.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? Okay, please.
My name is Hiroyoshi Kakayama from the Sumitomo Farm Nippon. I think it's to make a breakthrough for the space business. One of the good things is to show for the space technology, to show some example. For example, for me, the transportation is very interesting. For example, using for the space technology for the transportation all over the world, it might be very important. So, what's the situation of this technology from the transportation? For example, from Tokyo to the Boston for the 2 hours, such a kind of the thing is to the former sessions related to this thing is might be it if we in Japan to contribute to the world, might be the more still we need to see someone and to communicate face to face. Such a kind of technology are really interesting. I want to ask you what's the situation of using the space technology, the transportation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Probably Dan, you're familiar with it.
You know, it's the dream, right? Is to Tokyo to New York in 2 hours or something like that, and you know, that requires 15,000 miles an hour-ish kind of stuff. I mean, it's a great goal. But as we see over and over, it's very, very difficult to make things go that fast, and that's the secret of putting things into space, and the expense is immense. I guess when the market demands it, that will drive the innovation, and that will drive the regulation that can allow that. But as we saw with the supersonic transport, even London, New York, or Paris, New York, couldn't support the infrastructure to allow a 2-hour transatlantic crossing. So, I mean, I agree. That's very exciting, and it seems like after 100 years of flying people in airplanes, that we should be able to figure out how to do this. But I think it will be that will have to be market driven to get the investments and the regulation to catch up.
Guy, would you like to add some more words on it?
There is a long history of relationship between Europe and Japan on that supersonic activity. I have to say that unfortunately this has been dragging quite a bit and not going too much further. And this is, like Danny said, it's market driven. People today have some difficulties to see the real market, and then the money doesn't flow the way we expect it flows. So.
Thing from my NASA time, and NASA also does aeronautics research. The first A in NASA is aeronautics, as we always say. And so it's one of the smaller aspects of NASA investment, but it is happening. And I would add on the market-driven, I would say it's also technology-driven. I mean, I think the Concorde wasn't supported because the cost was so high, because the technology maybe wasn't mature enough. But as the research is happening, technology is changing, and I think there's talk about these kind of short flights, London, New York, Tokyo, in number of hours. It might be sooner than we think. I mean, with the technology happening, I know NASA and JAXA are working on supersonic technologies together. The research is going on, and airlines are gaining interest. So it's still a ways away, and of course there has to be that market. But I think the technology might be catching up to where you can hit that sweet spot where there's a price point that people are going to be interested in. So yeah, it'd be great if it happens.
Yeah, I think so too, because there are two ways: the supersonic airplanes and also the space, transportation. So it's related to the space tourism, and many companies are working on a space tourism. So once that happens, it will make a breakthrough point. So yes, please, and I will take a couple questions combined. So go ahead, please.
Hi, I'm Kenji Kashida from Stanford University. I have a question out of deep ignorance, and it's to Dan, because it's big picture. So when we were in a world of having very large satellites, and now we can make them very small, what's the technological underlying driving force that has allowed that? Is it more processing power, and that enables various material science, et cetera, to move forward? And if there's been that much change in the past 30 years, is there any reason to believe that we've already passed a big change of juncture, and it's going to be relatively stable, or it's just going to accelerate, or go constantly? So 20 years from now, are these things going to be much, much cheaper still, driven by something like Moore's Law? And so we're looking back and saying, look, it's a big change to now. Looking forward, do we expect the change, and are we preparing for that? Because that changes the politics, the regulations, the systems, et cetera.
Well, that's very interesting. I would venture to say that the biggest shift that's caused this microspace innovation is a change in mindset. And I think it used to be that we thought of satellites as reflectors, because that's what they first were. They would receive a signal and they would just turn it back and send it back down. And to do that, it needed to be very, very far away, because that's where the geo orbit is. And then you needed a huge dish and huge batteries, because you need a big transmitter to get the signal back down. And so people, that's what satellites do, or they take pictures. And so now you need a very sophisticated pointing system and sophisticated optics to take pictures or get other kind of data from the ground. And the thought, I think the mentality was, hey, I'm spending $500 million on this thing. Let's add another sensor, and it just grows and grows and grows. I think that the huge shift was, I don't even know who or when it got invented, but somebody said 10 centimeter cube is going to be the unit, and we're going to make that the standard size and interface, and then anybody who can put anything that they want in this 10 centimeter cube will have an infrastructure around it. We'll have a way to hold it. We'll have a way to deploy it. We'll have a way, and so it's not that. We made microchips smaller. They've been small for dozens of years. And it's not that we've made solar panels any more efficient, because they're not. So the power is all the same. We've probably done a little bit better in signal processing and getting the signal back from something that's a couple hundred miles away. But I think the shift is the mindset change. Like, I can really do something interesting in this space, and I can get data that's useful. I can create a business model based on something that's this big. And so I think that there's really no technological breakthrough that's allowed something to be this size. Probably a breakup of function. You can't get satellite TV to your house in something that small, but there are many, many, many things that can be done in something that small. So I don't think it's technological breakthrough. I don't know if it's going to continue to get smaller. I don't know that it has to. If you can do functions in 10 cubic centimeter, 10 centimeters cubed, it's they're now you're only limited by, well, you're mostly limited by imagination. What can you do? And so I don't know if that really answers your question, but it's hard for me to imagine things getting smaller, because now actually the orbital effects of something much smaller than that become an issue. Now drag coefficient, now you're actually going to be influenced by the environment at 100 miles, a couple hundred miles above. I hope that answers your question.
Okay, thank you. And if you're interested, let's take a look at the Chris company, Astroscale, which is in Kinshicho. Aoki-san.
Just want to mention one thing about his question is that if you look at the drone industry, that's happening the same as the space industry. Instead of having a huge, massive, and expensive, military drones, we have drones on hand right now. Yeah. That's what's happening in the space industry. So once you have the drone on your hand, a lot of people start thinking about what you can do with these cheap drones, right? So that's what's happening in space. So we get more and more people getting involved in commercial-based space activities. That's what's happening.
Yeah, what is interesting to see also that during many years the race was to get that big rocket to be able to bring large satellite upstairs, and now the race is to make the rocket smaller in order to bring those CubeSat up there. And now there is another tendency that's saying that maybe we can use those big rockets to launch a lot of CubeSat. So it's a moving world, and once again the demand will drive the technology.
Well, thank you. And other questions and comments? So I'd like to hear three of us together. So in order, please. Oh. Okay.
Okay, thank you very much for your great comment. My name is Toshinobu. Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry, Moon. My name is Toshinobu Yamamoto, Microelectronics. Well, there are two questions. The first one is, especially for the Chris, if we have a issue in the aerospace without, for example, the clean up the space, what kind of the issue you have from your experience? That is or some other opportunities to be join the aerospace business. That is the first question. The second question is for Miss Naoko Yamazaki. My question from the strongly to be asked you about the question because you were very ladies to be get the opportunity to be as astronauts in the United States. This kind of the opportunity is very rare in Japan. And recently, the government is mentioned the ladies should be more participant in the society, and also in our company also have a big question: how should be promoted the lady, the who has a talented? So, from your experience, we'd like to know how to be get the opportunity to be promoted to get the astronauts. Thank you.
Hear questions altogether, so please.
Hi, it's a cliche, but my name is Moon, like the moon in the sky. And it's actually a comment to Mr. Daniel Tani, and just a quick questions for you, Mr. Aoki, later on. You say the biggest problem in the space industry is the whole demystifying problem, right? It's just like so mysterious all the time. Last year, I did a session with the NASA's Chief Information Officer in Washington, D.C., for knowledge transfer, and we have identified the biggest problem was that NASA or other big space organizations do not have a problem of attracting the really brightest engineers, but at the end of the day, the problem really lies in how to really work together, do the design thinking, do the change management, and how to know when to go fast and when to slow down. So what I would say is that at the end of the day, like when you're too much focusing on the technology and the mind, we really have to figure out a way to how to work simultaneously to be able to bring the solutions together. Now, Aoki-san, my question for you is, obviously you have a fantastic corporation that you have built out and a venture capital, but you do need support from the government. But have you thought about like providing this support simultaneously to these government organizations and other companies so that they can move faster and be really efficient?
And
okay, I
please.
might be on the same line. My question goes to Aoki-san as well. In past 5 years, 20 new countries enter into a new space program. So the market is growing overseas, and my point is that especially in emerging markets, what are your strategy for your portfolio companies to actually capture this opportunity? Thank you. My name is Akinori from ACA India. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So Dan, I'm sorry, Chris, aerospace issues, questions?
So this was, if I can understand your question, other problems that we're trying to solve in aerospace that smaller companies are doing. You need look no further than what's happening in Japan right now in terms of the venture space activities. So Astroscale, we're looking for a solution to solving space debris. Huge problem, great technological challenge. Hakuto, iSpace, trying to send a rover to the moon. And the challenge there is going to be to potentially supply future astronaut teams that settle there, or to mine resources on the moon. So that's a Japanese company looking to do that. So there we're looking at, low Earth orbit cleanup. There's one major aerospace problem. Second major problem, how to support future exploration into deeper space. That's what Hakuto is doing, right? So that's number 2. 3, the company Axel Space, which was mentioned earlier, Japanese company Axel Space. They are launching a lot of small Earth observation, high resolution Earth observation satellites. So in line with everything that was discussed, getting more companies involved in providing Earth observation data to help with climate change, to help with weather, to help with crop management, all of the things that we need to do here on Earth. So using space to benefit Earth. There's a company, Interstellar Technologies, developing a new launch vehicle. So a new technology to find cheaper, more frequent launches is one that's happening. And then there's the entertainment side of space. Yamazaki-san mentioned space tourism, but there's a company in Tokyo called ALE, A-L-E, which is trying to develop artificial shooting stars. They're going to have a satellite that drops something into the atmosphere, and it will look like a shooting star coming down. So if you think about the technologies that are out there, the problems that are out there, that technologies are needed to solve, I mean, what I just said was only the Japanese companies, right? This small little area. So when you look bigger, there's so many other issues out there that we're needing to be prepared to solve, and that small companies are focused on.
So do you think we have opportunity to do sushi tempura beryllium?
Eventually, yes.
Okay, for the diversity questions. Well, I have a background in engineering, and I went to a high school for only girls, and so the half of the students go to the science field. So fortunately, I didn't get any stereotype idea. But in Japan, I think those kind of stereotype is still strong. So I think, the education is very important for the younger girls. So I think the dance activity is very important. So the education is important. And the question to Aoki-san, could you answer?
Yes, so the combining government money as well as the VC venture capital money in parallel, it's possible, and it's a must in the space sector. If you look at SpaceX, they wouldn't have been successful without the NASA support. They had an order from NASA to launch a rocket. At the same time, they had the private money from the venture capitalists as a risk money. So they keep getting risk money every 2 years or so, and at the same time, every few years, they keep getting orders from NASA. That's what makes space business accelerate. So that's what we are trying to do in Japan as well. Axel Space is one of the examples that gets support from JAXA to create the microsatellite for JAXA, and they also get the funding from private money from venture capitalists. So that's one of the solutions that we can do. And from your question, it's a very important question. And if you look at the space industry, the size of the space industry is like $300 billion worldwide. It's very huge. And the size was only half 10 years ago. So it's growing. It's growing. So everybody is trying to get, good part of the evolutions of the space industry, and so there are a lot of chances to start space startups, and a lot of business models you can come up with, and we haven't come up with all of it. So if you're interested in, just go ahead and do it, and there are a lot of chances that you can do. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. Fortunately, time is running up, so I'd like to get some, summary words from each of you and then close this session.
I'll start on here. Well, just in summary, it's exciting to talk about the future of this industry, an industry I've been involved in a long time, and it's I think the outlook and the is great, and I'm very optimistic in I'm excited to hear all the cool things that are going to happen in this industry in the upcoming years. I've heard a few, and every new idea, I just go, wow, that is fantastic, and that's a great use of this asset we have up in space.
Yeah, quickly, I believe we are at a shift in the industry, and the future is, as usual, in front of us, but a different future, a different and brighter future with a lot of more investment from different companies, different people, different minds, and that will drive the success of space activities.
So I'd say just from the personal side, from our company, we talked all about how this proliferation, explosion of small sats is happening. There will need to be someone to clean them up. And so that's the first step that I'd say, just from what we're trying to do. From the bigger picture, yeah, it's going. But I would caution everyone that there's going to be ups and downs. Space is still difficult, it's still dangerous, it's still expensive. So there's going to be ups and downs in how these investments go, but the trajectory is upward. So it's going to need the government investment, and it's going to need investors who maybe have a longer range vision about what they're investing in. You know, everyone is looking at near-term returns, but we need people to have longer-term vision, like Aoki-san, about what space will be eventually.
Yes, 10 to 20 years from now, we will be going back to moon, and we will be going to the moon, to the Mars, and eventually live. So there are a lot of opportunities. So we want everybody to get involved in space activity, and I call this as the space economy.
Okay, thank you so much. So if you're interested, please contact us. And also under the G1, there are some technology research office, and under the technology, we have space, AI, robotics. So please contact us. And thank you so much for your participation.